Borderlands 3 has gotten so much criticism in the past, but without a doubt in my mind, the most criticized part of Borderlands 3 has been its story. But what makes its story so bad? The cringy writing, the death of Maya, Ava being too involved, fan favorites from previous games not being involved enough? No. Believe it or not, but all of those reasons have nothing to do with what makes this story bad. 90% of the problem with Borderlands 3's story is its length. Now, let me just explain what I mean by that. Full disclosure here, I know it's been just over 3 years already since Borderlands 3 came out and everyone's already said their piece with its story. But aside from one video a while back talking about the Calypso twins, I really haven't spoken much at length about the actual story, just the Calypso twins themselves. I'm Constant Canadian, and this is the actual problem with Borderlands 3's story. A huge part of the Borderlands franchise is replayability. It's how Borderlands has managed to gain and keep such a cult following. Some of the most fun I've had in Borderlands 2 was the road from level 1 to level 72, which was in part due to the fact that Borderlands 2's story was engaging, but even more due to the fact that Borderlands 2's story was short and sweet. When compared to Borderlands 3's story, this is even more obvious. Beating the story in Borderlands 3 takes almost twice as long as beating the story in Borderlands 2, and feels about as long as beating Borderlands 2's story 3 times to get to Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. Therein lies the first problem with Borderlands 3's story. Its story is just too long and drawn out to be happily replayable. And for those of us who like to finish the story and get straight to endgame, it just feels like a massive chore to get to the part of the game you actually enjoy. Another pretty big issue with Borderlands 3's story is its subplots. Don't get me wrong, I like lore and world building just as much as the next gamer, but we spend so much time in Borderlands 3 doing what just feels like side quests. There are multiple very large portions of the game that feel almost completely unnecessary, and that take way too freaking long to be worthwhile. There are a couple of areas in Borderlands 3 that are like this, but none are more prevalent than Eden 6. I mean, holy crap, so much of the story is spent on Eden 6. And while I understand that it's meant to be swampy and jungly, it just makes it that much more annoying to get through. I have played well over 2,000 hours of this game, and don't get me wrong, I love playing it, but every time the part with Eden 6 comes around, I have to question if I should even try to finish this playthrough or just go to one of the already max level characters I have. It's not just Eden 6 though, there are other areas that feel like they exist exclusively to pad playtime more than anything. However, Eden 6 is definitely the worst offender by far. Kind of similar to that last point, a lot of what we as the player do in Borderlands 3 feels almost pointless. Like I said previously, a lot of this game just feels like a bunch of side quests thrown together. I think a good word for it would be Anthology. It's not one cohesive story, instead it feels more like 3 or 4 connected stories all in one package. The only real thing that connects these parts of the stories together is the Calypso twins being the main antagonist. This leads to a lot of what we do feeling super unrewarding. In every other Borderlands game, opening the vault is the end goal. It's the climax of your adventure, the final epic battle at the end of your game. In Borderlands 3, however, we not only open 3 different vaults, but we also journey into 2 other separate vaults. At the risk of sounding cliche, vaults used to feel super special and rare, but in Borderlands 3, vaults feel more like another random chest room. And honestly, this all wouldn't be a huge deal if it weren't for how disappointing the Great Vault was. The excess of vaults was fairly excusable, because the whole game was leading up to this planet-sized vault that was supposed to contain a star-destroying monster. Except that when we finally got there, it is the exact same as every other vault we go to. After Tyreen leeches the destroyer, she is no different than any other boss in this game. For those of you who didn't play the first game, the final boss in that game is also the destroyer, the monster that Tyreen leeches at the end of Borderlands 3. However, what we don't find out until Borderlands 3 is that the creature that we fight in the original Borderlands is just the mouth of the destroyer. So needless to say, I expected the final boss fight of Borderlands 3 to be an epic, intense, massive boss fight, but it wasn't. This planet-sized monster that we are supposedly fighting isn't even the biggest monster in the whole franchise. Hell, it's not even the biggest monster in Borderlands 3. This leads to a very underwhelming and unrewarding final boss fight, and an incredibly anticlimactic ending. It isn't just the vaults that feel less rewarding. I know I've picked on Eden 6 a lot in this video, but that whole area feels so pointless. It was essentially just a plot device for Tannis to end up kidnapped. It's the same with Necrotafeo. Literally the entire part of the game revolving around Necrotafeo could have been removed completely, and the story would be almost identical. Sure, we got a bunch of lore for Tyreen, Troy, and Typhon de Leon, but they're literally all dead now, so what are we gonna do with that lore? Necrotafeo at the very least tied up a few loose ends that were left since the beginning of the game. However, Eden 6 literally has no purpose. The only thing of significance that happens on Eden 6 is Tannis being kidnapped. Even our reward for opening the vault on Eden 6 is just the ability to use artifacts. There is next to zero actual significance in Eden 6. The entire planet could have been completely removed from the game and it would have changed literally nothing. The only redeeming part of Eden 6 is that it has a lot of past characters from previous games. Other than that though, it's literally pointless and serves little to no purpose. So far we've talked about what was in the game that made the story worse than other iterations, but there is one thing that wasn't in this game that actually made the story way worse. The Great War. For those of you unfamiliar, the Great War was teased at the end of Borderlands the pre-sequel by the Watcher, the Guardian who appears occasionally throughout that game's story. In the Watcher's own words, war is coming and you will need all the Vault Hunters you can get. You may be asking yourself, why is he telling me all this? Well, after playing through the pre-sequel, which took place in the timeline almost immediately before Borderlands 3, you would expect this Great War that was being teased to be the focus of Borderlands 3's story. Now, I can't say for sure that Borderlands 3's story wasn't the Great War, but what I can say with absolute certainty is that if that was the Great War, then it was a pretty pathetic Great War. That is what Borderlands 3's biggest problem was, not cringy writing or Ava. It was simply the lack of this Great War that was teased at the end of the pre-sequel. Borderlands 3 came out 5 years after the pre-sequel, which gave fans a lot of time to hype up this war, and when Borderlands 3 came out, that's what we expected, not just another bandit massacre simulator with another basic villain story. Borderlands 3 story gets so much hate, even still to this day. However, most of it is really misplaced. Don't get me wrong, the story is nowhere near perfect, or even great for that matter, but for the most part, I enjoy playing through Borderlands 3, though I would probably enjoy it a lot more without Eden 6. But anyway, that's gonna wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thank you all so much for watching and have a great day.